Welcome to Short Shifts, part of the NHL Wraparound podcast with weekday updates from around the National Hockey League. Vic Morren along with Neil Smith, and a lot of headline stuff on Wednesday and Thursday evening. You were at Madison Square Garden to watch the rematch between the New York Rangers and the Florida Panthers. Once again, Florida comes out on top, 3-1. And was there anything in that game that told you anything is going to necessarily be different if these teams match up in the playoffs in the spring?
Yeah, I don't know that I can look that far ahead, but I do know that the Florida Panthers came out and were ready to, their nickname is Time to Hunt, and they really went on the hunt quickly. They scored early within, I think, the first minute, and then they scored again and made it 2-0 and just killed the Garden crowd. And then the Rangers did come back with one in the first period to make it 2-1, and then that sort of held up for most of the game. But what I found was the intensity of the Panthers was higher than the intensity of the Rangers, and the Rangers did have a few good flurries. Zibanejad and Panarin were not even there last night. They were invisible, and it just was a good Florida road win, just an excellent Florida road win. Of course, Bobrovsky played on par with Shesterkin, so that sort of offset the fact that the Rangers have this demonstrative advantage with this great goaltender. Bobrovsky at the other end was playing tit for tat.
And became the fastest goaltender in NHL history to reach 400 wins. He did it in his 707th game. And Sam Bennett with his sixth goal. So, with Barkov out and Tkachuk had missed 5 games before returning in the previous game. It's that next man up mentality. And I think it's also a real testament to them that they could play that grimy game down low. But they were dangerous in open ice last night as well.
Yeah, they were. And the guy that really impressed me that I noticed all night long was number 13 on Florida, was Sam Reinhart. He kills penalties. He plays a power play, takes a regular shift. I mean, he's out there a lot. And you notice this guy when playing. And they play as a pack again this year. What I mean by that is some of the names that are out there are not stars. They're not there. You got to look at their jersey and read the name to realize they're on the team. But they play with that pack mentality. And again, it was just an excellent road game for Paul Maurice and his crew.
We entered Thursday night with 4 clubs having not lost in regulation. The Rangers were one of them, so scratch them off the list. One team that remains perfect, the Winnipeg Jets, who had a 3-1 lead in the third period in Seattle last night, surrendered a couple of goals. But boy, Nikolai Ehlers in overtime on a delayed penalty keeps the Jets perfect on the season. And this is really one of the great early stories in the NHL.
Well, it is. And the reason it is because I don't know that anybody saw this coming. They changed coaches this year. Scott Arniel is their new head coach. Yeah. What a great start he's getting off to in his head coaching with the Winnipeg Jets. But I didn't see it coming. And you're right. Ehlers is playing well. How many guys are playing really well for them? Scheifele's playing well. Kyle Connor's playing great for them. You can keep going on it, and Morrissey on defense, and of course having Hellebuck in net helps everything too, because he's off to again proving that he's one of the very top guys in the NHL in the goal.
Neil Pionk has played well on defense. Comrie has done a very serviceable job when he's called upon, when Hellebuck has not played. So all systems go so far for the Jets. Great start by them. And also the other surprise, the Minnesota Wild go into Tampa Bay. They win on Thursday night, and 4 straight wins, all on the road. Marc-Andre Fleury in goal. And one of the most important aspects for the Wild this year is that they have scored first in all 7 games that they have played. They're 5-0-2 right now. And that enables John Hines and his troops to pretty much play the way they want to, as opposed to having the pace of play dictated back to them.
That's true. And, they got outshot last night, and Fleury came through. They were outshot 25-18. Marc-Andre Fleury played a great game for them against a very obviously excellent offensive team with guys like Kucherov and the rest of them there. And yet the Minnesota, who got behind in the second period 2-1 at one point, and then Eriksson Ek came back and tied the game before that period was over, and then 2 power play goals in the third for the Minnesota Wild salted it away. So, again, this is a team that's a surprising, shocking start. Kaprizov, with his third and fourth goals of the season. He's starting out really well. And Minnesota Wild might be for real. They didn't make the playoffs last year. They weren't scheduled to make it this year, according to the experts. But this start will really pay dividends down the road.
And Kaprizov tied for third in league scoring with 13 points. So Craig Berube goes against the club that he led to the Stanley Cup in 2019. And they really take it on the chin from the St. Louis Blues by a 5-1 score. The offer sheet signees, Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg, combined for 3 goals. But I think the most noteworthy part of this game was, you remember we talked about on Saturday evening, Jim Montgomery chewing out his captain, Brad Marchand. And last night, Auston Matthews, the captain of the Leafs, somewhat soft defensively on the third St. Louis goal. And Berube went to the end of the bench and he tore into his captain. And this is the kind of thing that we had spoken about with Doug Armstrong when we asked him how the superstars would fare under Berube. And this is a pretty good indication that the head coach that is behind the bench now in Toronto is like nothing that they have seen previously with Sheldon Keefe.
Yeah, this is definitely not a player's first coach. I mean, he's a win first and do it my way coach. And Doug Armstrong said that to us when I questioned Doug about how would Craig Berube adjust to the type of players he's going to have in Toronto. He said, well, it's not a case of that. It's going to be a case of the players adjusting to Berube. And that seems to be the case. And, I was shocked by the result last night, Vic, because although Toronto really badly outshot the Blues, and one can give the victory just to Jordan Binnington and his 40 saves, and that probably in reality is what won them the game, you would have thought that the Toronto Maple Leafs would have all thrown some money up on the board and said, look, we got to beat these guys for Chief, the nickname for Craig Berube. And to take a 5-1 shellacking at home from a non-playoff St. Louis Blues, I'm sure that that ruffled some feathers with Craig Berube.
And you could see that he was genuinely unhappy with that effort last night. By the way, Joseph Woll started in goal and looked a little shaky early. I think got his game back as the game went along, but it was just not a night where Toronto got any sort of momentum going. They got shellacked in Columbus in the game before. So now 2 losses in a row for the Leafs, and you could already tell that things are a little bit unsettled, but at the same time, it's October 25th. And for the Toronto media and the fans to get all up in arms, probably a little bit premature, don't you think?
But that's Toronto, and they got they're going to turn this around, and I have every confidence that perhaps this game they'll look back on this and say this is where we really learned that we got to turn things around. I think this might be a benchmark game, this 5-1 loss to the Blues. Often in a good season, you look back and say, okay, you know what, when we lost to so-and-so and we were really mad that night after the game and everybody was mad at us at practice the next day, that's when we started to tune in and pay more attention and get our game going.
And very interesting game coming up for the Leafs. Their next opponent, the Boston Bruins, who we all know have had their number in the postseason in recent years. And speaking of the Bruins, they were defeated by the Dallas Stars last night. And the Stars with 3 power play goals in that game. And we saw a lot of shots of Jim Montgomery last night, not happy with his team behind the bench. And the Bruins are clearly a team that's struggling a bit.
They clearly are. And, you look at, you can't help but look at Swayman and see how he is playing because of what happened in the offseason. And, he wasn't sharp last night. They were down 4-1 by the late in the second period, made it 4-2. Midway through the period, I should say. And then in the third period, Rupe Hintz gets another goal with just about 2 minutes to go into the empty net, which sealed the deal 5-2. So Swayman isn't got his game back yet. He didn't have any training camp, so maybe that's the reason why. But they've got some major concerns in Boston.
In Detroit last night, this game was not a headliner, but was extremely entertaining. And the Red Wings, on a late goal by Patrick Kane, took a 4-3 lead. Then they score an empty net goal to win 5-3 in a game that was actually pretty chippy, had a couple of fights in it. I mean, two teams that you wouldn't think would be engaging in fisticuffs and some chippy play. And probably the signature moment of last night was right at the end on Michael Rasmussen's empty net goal. Puck deep in the jersey end. He came out from behind the net, stuffed it in, and Jack Hughes was there to try to lay a hit on Rasmussen, and he hit the Detroit player and went straight down, and that led to some more chirping. But, hey, a week ago when I was on, I was speaking about how the Red Wings are in trouble. They have now reeled off 3 straight wins, so that tells you that I didn't do too well on that one.
Here's an interesting stat for you, though. Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, and Dougie Hamilton combined for 8, 8, and 6. That is 22 shots. Those 3 Jersey players had 22 shots. Detroit as a team had 20. So it just goes to show you that those guys are still on their game. It was a good night for Detroit. This is the second game in a row, though, that they've been badly outshot. The same thing happened on the island. They got outshot there and only had to score 1 Patrick Kane goal and won 1-0 there. So Detroit's finding a way to do it defensively, and the Devils just weren't able to crack through last night on the Red Wings and Cam Talbot, who was in net. So it was Alex Lyon against the Islanders that got the shutout, and now Cam Talbot comes back with a 37 save night against the Red Wings.
Terrific job in goal, and as long as that goaltending holds up, they certainly have enough talent. And just want to talk about Hischier for a second. Already up to 7 goals this season, so on his way to a career year in the goal-scoring department. Moving out west, Calgary was another unbeaten team in regulation last year. They lost 4-2 to the Carolina Hurricanes. Pyotr Kochetkov, that's my guy in goal for the Hurricanes. If they make it to the playoffs this year, that's the guy I think they should be riding. 30 saves in that one. And the Colorado Avalanche go into Utah. They win their game. And I think really what's more interesting there, Justus Annunen again in goal for the Avalanche.
Yes, he was. And I did a good job. Obviously, the shots were even in that game, 26-26, the final score 5-1. It is interesting. What are they going to do in goal? They're going to have to keep riding Annunen now because he is playing well. I was a little bit surprised that the Utah Hockey Club couldn't get more goals because they are pretty good offensively. But maybe Colorado, who is one of the top teams in the league, we all know that, but maybe they're coming around the corner now back to making a statement that they're that they are something to contend with. By the way, in this game, a power play goal by the only man in the league that I've ever known in all my years of covering this and watching this, whose last name is the same as his first name. Ivan.
Ivan.
Yeah.
Best name in the league. Easiest one to remember, probably also, right? Yeah. The Avalanche have now won 4 straight after dropping their first 4. So they have certainly got their ship righted. Something to note for the Utah Hockey Club is their back line is really banged up. They just put Sean Dursey with shoulder surgery and John Marino, who's yet to play a game for them, and he's got a back issue. They are both out long-term. Robert Bortuzzo is day-to-day, and Maverick Lamoureux, who was a first draft pick in, I believe, 2022, made his NHL debut. So considering the good start that Utah had, that back line is getting thin, and it's getting thin quick.
It is. And this Maverick Lamoureux, their first-round pick that you mentioned, who played his first game in the NHL last night, 6'7". So comes in and tries to get that giraffe-like body ready for the speed of the NHL. ClaytonKeller again last night, 5 shots on goal. He's an offensive threat every single night. And topped in that game only by Cale Makar, the defenseman for Colorado, who had 6 shots on net from the blue line. So I still believe in Utah. I still think they're going to end up being pretty good. They got to look after that back end. They're going to have to do something. Bill Armstrong's going to have to do something to shore that up.
He is. And one other game last night, San Jose Sharks remain in the winless column. The LA Kings playing their first home game of the season after 7 straight opening on the road. They get off to a 3-0 lead in the first period. 2 goals by Warren Foegele. David Riddick makes 24 saves, and they hold off the Sharks. But boy, that San Jose team they can't find a break. Granlund did get a couple of goals, one of the lone bright spots, but boy, this is really rough in Northern California.
It sure is. Before we go on to the Sharks, I just want to mention with Warren Foegele getting 2 goals last night, and Holloway getting 2 goals for the Blues, and Broberg getting a goal for the Blues. There's 3 ex-Oilers who played in the playoffs for the Oilers last year, scoring big time. So you think about the Oilers and their early season struggles, and then you look at these guys that they lost and how well they're doing for other teams, and it's not hard to understand why you might be struggling without those guys. Now, their depth has really been hurt by losing these guys. So back to the Kings and the Sharks. I worry more about the Kings and what this says to me about the Kings, that they can only beat the Sharks 3-2 in the home opener. Than I do about what it says about the Sharks. We all know that the Sharks are going to be in the lottery for the first overall pick again. But if I were the Kings, I'd be worried that that's what I don't think they're playing well. I just don't think they're a real good team, and I'm not so sure that they're going to be able to make it this year, especially with Drew Doughty out of the lineup for so long, who's a mainstay of their defense for the last decade.
Well, they will be getting some home cooking now that they're off the road for a bit. So let's see how they perform at home and whether or not they can actually build upon a record that is 4-2-2 right now. So if they can build upon that and at some point they get Doughty back, then maybe this team will be a bubble club for the playoffs when we get to spring. One game on Wednesday night that's worth noting, Washington now 5 1 on the season with a 6-3 win over Philadelphia. And this was a game that the Caps got out 4-0. Flyers got the next 3 until a pair of empty netters for the Capitals sealed that game. But the curious aspect here is the Philadelphia goaltending. And Ivan Fedotov played again and surrendered 4 goals early, actually managed to keep the club in the game, which helped Flyers come back only to fall short. But there's something about the depth in net about Philly that we have mentioned before, and we're going to probably mention many more times during the rest of the season. And it's questionable whether or not Fedotov is NHL ready.
Oh, absolutely. It's questionable. And he came in, late last season, and Sam Erson's not ready to be a number 1 goaltender. We've said that several times. So they have a big question mark there. I think they got a big question mark everywhere this year. I think they're regressing from where they were last year. They did it by committee last year. John Tortorella got a lot out of those guys, but I'm not sure he's going to be able to do that. And then their start is certainly not indicative of a team that's going to be looking to get into that wild card spot.
When I watch Fedotov play also, he's a goaltender that, as Brian Boucher had mentioned correctly on the telecast the other night, that he has trouble with traffic in front. I also find that he doesn't challenge pucks well, that plays from behind the net that come into the slot. And he plays very deep in his net. He doesn't come out like an Igor Shesterkin that comes out and actually challenges the puck.
Yeah. So he's got these are things that he's going to have to work on and learn. Remember, he had a whole year away from hockey when he did his military service in Russia. So we'll see what happens with the big Fedotov and also just the Philadelphia goaltending situation and what they're going to do and who's out there that they could perhaps bring in as a veteran who's available, who's still ready to play. To give Fedotov maybe some time in the minors so that he can get ready for the North American game.
And I think also for Philly, a lot of these forwards that kind of got their baptism by fire 2 years ago and again last year just have not produced in the early going, and that is really compounding the problems in Philadelphia. A couple other notes before we look ahead to the weekend. Anthony Duclair of the New York Islanders out 4 to 6 weeks with a lower body injury. So for a team that's been shut out 3 times already, and he was really being counted on to help augment their goal scoring, that's going to be a big challenge for the Islanders. Tristan Jarry has been sent back to Pittsburgh for individual work with their goalie coach. He's making $5.375, which is twice that of Joel Blumberg and Alex Nedeljkovic, who are now manning the net in Pittsburgh. And Shea Theodore extends in Vegas 7 years at $7.425 AAV. So just a few notes from around the NHL as we head into the weekend. And Neil, speaking of which, what are you looking forward to this weekend?
Well, we talked about it before the show with Ottawa. Are they the real deal this year? Finally, are they going to be real? And they're going into Vegas tonight to play against the Vegas Golden Knights. I'm interested in that one. And then, of course, on Friday, you can't help but always get intrigued by Toronto and Boston when they play each other. And so there'll be a game. Both teams not happy. Both coaches not happy. We talked about that. That's Toronto at Boston, 7:00 on Friday. I'm sorry, on Saturday. And then you've also got Calgary playing against Winnipeg at home. So Winnipeg coming into Calgary on Saturday night. That'll be a hockey night in Canada. Big game. Let's see how good Winnipeg is and see if Calgary can keep going against a very good Winnipeg team.
Absolutely. The games that I'm looking forward to, Friday night, Pittsburgh and Edmonton, the game of greatness, 87 against 97. And Connor McDavid on Thursday touted Sidney Crosby to be the captain for Team Canada in the Four Nations tournament that'll be coming up in February. And it's really hard to doubt the logic given that Crosby has won 3 cups. He's won Canada Cups. He's won gold medal in the Olympics. So certainly that's a good enough resume for me to endorse him also to be the captain of that club. And then on Saturday, Washington and Tampa Bay, the Caps lost their season opener. They reeled off 5 straight. Spencer Carberry doing a hell of a job getting buy-in from that club. They're getting contributions from all over. And the other game that I'm looking at is Minnesota at Philadelphia. The Flyers won their first game, have not won since, and the Wild, one of only 2 clubs, Winnipeg being the other, that has not lost in regulation. So big weekend ahead, Neil.
And your games are better timed than mine because you've got that 1:00 afternoon game in Philadelphia you can watch and then watch your other games. I picked out all games that are at night, so stupid me.
Yeah, well, nonetheless, good distribution, good hockey coming up all weekend. That will do it for Short Shifts. And Neil and I will be back on Monday with another episode of NHL Wraparound.